Christmas night has a way of exposing truths people spend all year hiding, and I knew the moment. I parked my car outside my childhood home that this evening would not be gentle because the house looked the same, but the feeling around it didn't, and before I even stepped through the door, I could already sense the unspoken judgment waiting inside, the kind that doesn't raise its voice but still cuts deep, the kind that measures your worth before you even sit down. And I remember thinking, as snow settled quietly on the hood of my car, that some battles are decided long before words are exchanged. And still, I went in, because tradition has a gravity of its own, and because for years I had learned to show up, even when I wasn't welcome, even when silence was the loudest thing in the room, even when my presence alone made people uncomfortable. I arrived early like I always did. Boots damp with snow, coat warm but clean, nothing flashy, nothing that tried to impress, because I had stopped dressing for approval a long time ago, and the house my parents had struggled to keep for decades greeted me with the same soft yellow lights and familiar ornaments, the same crooked angel on the tree, the same faint smell of cinnamon and old wood, and for a moment, just a moment, it felt like the Christmases of my childhood when things were simpler and nobody kept score. But that feeling vanished the second my sister, Clara, noticed me standing in the hallway, her eyes moving quickly from my coat to my boots and then past me, toward the driveway as more cars arrived, newer cars, louder engines. People who carried success like a badge they wanted everyone else to see, and her smile tightened in a way I had come to recognize, polite but sharp, rehearsed but cruel, and she stepped closer, lowering her voice just enough to pretend she was being discreet before raising it again, so others could hear, saying, "I don't think you really belong here tonight." And when that wasn't enough, she added, "Maybe it's better if you leave." And the room went quiet in that uncomfortable way where nobody wants to intervene because intervention requires courage, and courage was in short supply that evening. And I stood there absorbing the words without reacting, because years in uniform had taught me that reacting quickly rarely improves anything, that patience is not weakness, but control. And so, I said nothing and took a seat at the table anyway, feeling the familiar sensation of being present, but invisible, included only by proximity, while conversations flowed around me as if I were an empty chair, voices rising with laughter about promotions, bonuses, vacations, new investments, and polished lives. All of it designed to remind me of what they believed I lacked. Because in their version of my story, I was the quiet one who left the military and disappeared into an unremarkable life. No visible ambition, no flashy achievements, no reason to admire. And they mistook my silence for emptiness, not knowing that silence can be full, not knowing that some of the heaviest responsibilities are carried without announcement. And as the dinner went on, Clara's discomfort turned into irritation, her eyes lingering on me as if my presence itself was an accusation. And eventually, she folded her arms and looked straight at me across the table, saying, "You're making people uncomfortable." And then, with a small laugh meant to soften the cruelty, "This is my house tonight." And something in that sentence finally demanded a response. Not anger, not defense, but clarity. And I stood up slowly, calmly, saying, "I'll go." And the relief in the room was immediate and obvious. But then I added, "Before I do, I need something from the kitchen." And the eye rolls came, the nervous chuckles, the assumption that this was some kind of drama, and I let them believe that because truth doesn't need to rush. And when I returned, I wasn't holding a speech or a weapon, just a thin folder, worn at the edges, filled with paperwork most people never read, because they dawn to realize how much power is stored in paper. And I placed it gently on the table, opening it to reveal the deed, my parents' house, their house, paid in full years ago when they were falling behind and too proud to ask for help. And I said evenly, "I never wanted to talk about this, not because I was ashamed, but because family isn't something you leverage for respect." And I continued, "But since I was asked to leave, I think it matters that you know." And I explained simply, without embellishment, that after leaving service, I lived the way I'd been trained, disciplined, methodical, patient, investing quietly, planning long-term, never chasing attention. And when my parents were in trouble, I handled it the same way I handled everything else, without noise, without credit, because responsibility doesn't need an audience. And as I spoke, the room changed, not dramatically, not loudly, but unmistakably. Clara's face draining of color, conversations dying mid-thought, the weight of realization settling in that the person they dismissed had been carrying them all along. And I didn't wait for apologies, because apologies offered under pressure rarely mean much. And I closed the folder, slid it back toward myself, and said, "You're all welcome to stay." Because generosity doesn't disappear when pride is wounded. It's Christmas. And then I picked up my coat and walked out into the snow, the cold air biting, but honest refreshing in a way. Warm rooms full of judgment never are, and behind me, the house remained silent, no one telling me to leave again, no one calling me back, just a quiet understanding that something irreversible had shifted. And as I stood there, letting snow settle on my shoulders, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not victory, not satisfaction, but peace. The kind that comes from knowing you did what needed to be done even when no one was watching. And if this story resonates with you, if you've ever been underestimated or judged by appearances, take a moment to subscribe to this channel, because stories like this remind us that quiet strength often carries the greatest weight. And as I drove away that night, I understood something. I wish more people learned earlier in life that respect isn't earned by announcing ownership or success out loud. It's earned by standing quietly when it matters most, by showing up when others don't, and by doing the right thing long before anyone knows you did it.